The thing about klezmer music is I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a klezmer music expert, because I am not. So why should you stay here and listen to me if I'm not a klezmer expert? Well, I am a clarinet expert. I'm not a klezmer expert because I did not study solely klezmer music. I know a little bit about klezmer, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be Jewish because I am not. About a third of my family is Jewish. I was not raised as being Jewish. Klezmer music is typically music that is very much centered in the Jewish religion, and so I'm going to be talking about some scales and modes and some rhythms and some ornaments, and we're going to play a little bit, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert in klezmer music. What I can do is I can get you playing klezmer music today, and this is going to be a lot like my my improv for classical musicians, like my jazz for classical musicians video, which I will put at the end of this video. I was really uncomfortable making that video because I was not a jazz or improv expert, but I think it got a lot of people sort of like, once people have the scales and a direction in which to take their playing, I feel like that, I'm just giving you how I got started, basically. With klezmer music, it's a little different because instead of scales, there are modes. A scale that you might be most familiar with is the harmonic minor scale. The harmonic minor scale is the most commonly used scale, but there's a couple different modes, and again, these modes, I'm going to put them at the bottom of the screen, and I can tell you what's in them, but I'm not going to try to pronounce them in the fear that I will pronounce it incorrectly. So let's talk about the scales / modes first. So the major scale that most of us know, not really used in klezmer music. Natural minor, melodic minor, and harmonic minor, they're all used, but the most commonly used scale that we're talking about is the harmonic minor scale. Now, there are 3 modes that I'm also going to talk about, and they don't fall into like Dorian or Mixolydian really because they're sort of modified based on those modes. I'm just going to give you how they're built, and then you can adapt them to any key. So I'm going to do this focused all around everything starting in the key of like D, D minor. We're going to do Ds. We're starting on Ds. So the first scale has a lowered second and a raised third, and sometimes a raised seventh. So it's almost like, so you have the harmonic minor scale, but you raise the second scale degree, you raise the third scale degree, you keep the B flat, and then you can either play a C natural or a C sharp. That's what's different about, like, a lot of modes typically have more notes than like a heptatonic scale, which has hept 7 notes. So I'll play it for you. I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. The next mode that I'm going to give you is essentially a D minor scale, but it's going to have a raised 4th. So it's going to have a G sharp, which is odd. And then we have our last mode that I'm going to sort of give you, which is a major scale, but with a lowered 7th and sometimes a lowered 3rd. It kind of depends on where you are in the scale, but... So those are some of the modes that klezmer music is built on, and if you have sort of like a klezmer sort of backing track, those modes will really help you to just sort of improvise over it. And you want to sort of keep in mind different sort of Hasidic rhythms, where like if you're clapping, you want this sort of like syncopated feeling. If this is your beat, you want to sort of feel like ta 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 ta. That sort of different rhythmic feel is kind of what we're going for. So let's talk about ornaments for a little bit, and I'll sort of describe what the different ornaments are. And a lot of the ornaments have sort of religious names that are tied to them, but I'm going to talk about them in a very sort of, in a secular way, because I want to not offend anybody. I hope this is not coming across as offensive. One of the ornaments is something that we call a hiccup, which is just sort of like a grace note that ends up being a third. If you're going from like E to F, just scale-wise in one direction, you can go up a third, and I'll just play it. If this was a rose etude, we would want to hear a very clear sort of grace note kind of thing happen. We want to make the upper note, the grace note, almost kind of like a ghost note. It doesn't have to be totally with sound, because that kind of goes along with the style of klezmer music, where we're not striving for perfection, we're looking for this style. So it's okay if the grace note doesn't come out, as long as it's sort of got that hiccup feeling to it. We also want to think about sort of bends in the pitches. Bend the pitch down, and then you come up to the next pitch. So you can have that kind of feeling, or you can bend and then come back. And I've got a video that goes sort of more in depth on how to bend a pitch, but you want sort of this yawning effect, like opening the back of your throat, kind of like you're yawning in the back of your throat, and really drop everything, relax everything. So hit the pitch, relax everything, yawn in the back of your throat to drop the pitch, and then return everything so that you come back to the original pitch. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in my throat. But I'm also moving my bottom lip too. But in my Black Dog videos, I do go into how to practice glissandos and bends in the pitch and sort of things like that. So I'll link that at the end. But that kind of yawning sound, the dropping of the throat, the dropping of the bottom lip, the opening of the jaw, that is sort of what we're striving for. And a lot of it isn't just the way that I'm explaining it to you. A lot of it is just going to be you sitting there and experimenting with what works best with your embouchure. If the genre of klezmer music is of interest to you, you should just listen to a lot of it. Because a lot of it at first, like just because of the sound that you're producing, and a lot of the techniques and a lot of the ornaments, they're not things that we typically learn from our teachers in traditional classical music settings. These are sort of the sounds that we're not allowed to make in classical music, for instance. But once you start listening to klezmer music, you get sort of a feel for the style, and then when you go to play klezmer music, because you already have the style sort of in your ear already, it kind of becomes very intuitive. In terms of placing ornaments, there's no manual that's going to tell you to put an ornament here or an ornament here. So, like klezmer music, once you start playing it, because it's so intuitive, you can put ornaments anywhere. Put ornaments everywhere. Put ornaments nowhere. Just the key to it is to experiment. One of my favorite klezmer pieces is The Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind. And there is an excellent recording that I am going to put down below of David Krakauer playing. David Krakauer is like the klezmer expert. If you listen to David Krakauer, you will hear a truly klezmer clarinetist. But I'm also going to link down below Ezekiel's Wheels, which is one of my favorite klezmer bands, and I'll also see what else I can find on the YouTube to link down below, so that you have a solid list of klezmer pieces to listen to. Going more into like the sound, vibrato in klezmer music is a thing. And you can use the lip vibrato, or you can use very deliberate air vibrato. I like the air vibrato, like the where we use our diaphragm muscle, and I also have a video on vibrato if you're interested. But I like the air vibrato because I can get a really, really slow vibrato, a very deliberate sounding vibrato, and it doesn't change the pitch. Because sometimes if you use lip vibrato, you run the risk of sounding too jazzy. I want to be able to control the sound that I'm making in terms of if I'm bending any pitches. I want to keep that sound locked in my embouchure and just use a very slow, deliberate vibrato, but you can use either one. And you don't have to use vibrato all the time. You can use it very minimally, kind of like you would do in like a classical solo piece. I use vibrato, but I use it very minimally because it's a nice color to add to a classical piece. It's also a nice color to add to a klezmer piece. It's also a nice color to add to a jazz piece. So the vibrato is just another expressive tool in our toolbox. One more thing is like the sound. There's like a specific klezmer sound. If you're playing, for instance, Mozart, you're gonna play with a kind of controlled sound that doesn't vary much from note to note. If I wanted to jazz that up a little bit, the actual klezmer sound is sort of more open, very throaty, very similar to the jazzy sound that I just used. I'm gonna just play a little bit of a piece that I'm actually gonna try to throw up on the screen for you right now, just like the first bit of it, so that you can get a sense, like you'll be able to actually physically see some of the ornaments. And I'm gonna add in some bends in the pitch to make it more sort of stylistically klezmer. Because there's, I mean, you can just do, and because of the mode that it's written in, it's going to sound klezmer anyway. So I'm going to just give it a little bit extra something. I'm not going to play it super fast so that you can kind of hear what I'm doing. A little bit of the klezmer sort of style, just sort of a more open sound, looser embouchure, a really open throat, looser fingers. It's interesting, like we're striving to play imperfect sounding music, but in a perfect way. So mistakes are fine. Mistakes are fine to make. If you squeak, it just makes it more authentic. With that being said, you probably want to try it. This website, 8notes.com, it's not the best, but it's sort of my go-to for like free online music. So I'm gonna put that below, and they actually have a whole klezmer section, and the piece that I just played is actually on that website. So I think it'd be cool if you just sort of, check out the site, listen to some klezmer players, and then play a little bit of klezmer music, and that's sort of like your introduction into klezmer music. So I hope that this helped. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that it wasn't offensive to anybody. And yeah, go listen to klezmer and go practice.